All right, welcome to the new episode of Now Loading Podcast. Today we will be talking about launch games, what they mean, what were great, what weren't, what stood out to us, the impact they have on the console itself, as well as hyped games that just missed that window and did they ever finally deliver. All that and more right here, right now. All right. So, launch games, launch lineups, what do those mean to us? I think that growing up, like looking forward to, so you had Travis. I had
I had Travis, yes.
I had my buddy Austin and Thomas, and we were like, that was like my little gaming clique. I mean, there's other people who came and go, but they're the ones I spent 95% of my gaming with. But at an early age, we remember reading about like the term killer app and like, the launch games of what made the system best. And we would like look at launch games. I remember like breaking it down, like looking at the PS2 launch. And then once the Xbox and GameCube were coming, like, oh, well, what are the best games? What are the reasons why you have to have this system and why this system's better? And like the launch lineup was like also important to us for some reason. But in reality, like there's a few rare gems, but in reality, the launch games you never look back on and like love or like have any kind of like fond memories of. It seems for the most part. I mean, was that the same for you?
Yeah, I think we buy into the hype a lot of the time ahead of time. So they build up these games, and you got your Ridge Racers and your Cameo,
Ridge Racer.
Yeah, and you got Cameo and. Just all of the games, we talked about Blue Stinger, like with the Dreamcast and all that. There's a bunch of games that they talk about, and I think what ends up happening is from what I've noticed, at least the first 3 to 6 months, there's only those handfuls of games, and then usually when that next holiday or the next big season kind of hits, it's just like a floodgate of stuff, and then everything moves so quickly that those launch games just kind of go out of mind unless they were like, the only most recent thing that I can think of is like Zelda Breath of the Wild. That's definitely like a killer app for the Switch. So,
yeah.
It'll be 2 years from now and it'll still be selling. But
yeah, that's true.
That's a whole nother beast within itself.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, the systems wouldn't launch with that many games. It was like a handful of games, and in Nintendo's world, launching with like on the SNES, like having Super Mario World day one. Like, yes, there was a few other games. I mean, I think F-Zero and there were some other games that like are still memorable for a lot of people, but like the fact that Super Mario World was available day one and is arguably like the best game on the system, I mean still after its life cycle, like is amazing. Like that they had that to like say, hey, this is why you should buy a Super Nintendo, of like that quality of game. But it was really like a handful of things, and then you get into like the PS4 and Xbox One launch with like, okay, do we have every genre covered? Okay, we got sports, we got action, we got shooter, we got sequel, we got original IP, we got first party, and like none of them like are that great, like it's like we have to get them all out day one, and don't worry, you'll like next year's version better, but here's something now just to like sell with your system. But
yeah, I feel that's almost always implied almost in the marketing as well, like, hey, this is kind of going to show off this next generation of power that you're going to get, but next year's is going to be 10 times better once we figure out what we're doing with it.
Like, remember when Madden launched on the 360, there was no franchise mode or anything. Like, it looked great, and it was like, man, this is what I want my football to be. But there wasn't like a franchise mode. You just played a season only, and that was it. And it was like, all right, well, I wish that, the version I'm playing on PS2 that I love, I wish all those features were here. Like, why can't I have the same right now? And it was just kind of like, it was like a head scratcher.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, let's talk about some that hit and some that missed.
Yeah. For you, in your head, in your memories, is there a launch game that you like still consider to be one of your favorite games of all time at all? And if so, what game is that?
I wouldn't say that there's a launch title that's my favorite game at all. There's ones that I have fond memories of because of the time and place in which they took, in which I played them in my life. But I wouldn't say that my favorite or even sit in my all-time favorite games at all. Like, to be honest with you, as I was thinking about this, I thought about that, and there was nothing that I loved. I love Zelda on the Switch, so that is a new thing. But
sure.
Anything prior, I don't have the same sentiment for it. I really don't.
I've got Super Mario 64 for the Nintendo 64. It's like in my top 5 guaranteed, potentially top 3 favorite games ever in the history of my entire gaming life. So like the fact that system launched with that game too, like just blows me away. I didn't get that system.
And I don't know if I even mentioned this before, but like the N64 era, I didn't really have. I didn't have a 64 and a friend around that had one that we actively played. So a lot of those games I played years past launch. Even GoldenEye. GoldenEye had already been huge before I even touched that game. I know that wasn't a launch game, but
yeah.
But yeah, 64 era was an era I missed.
Yeah, I went from my Sega Genesis, and then I convinced my parents to take me down to a local place. At the time, I was living in Arizona, and I'm now living in Arizona again. But I had them take me down to like a mom and pop, or it was like a local chain. It was called Gamers. And I brought my Sega Genesis in and all the games I had for it. And I was thinking like, all right, this will pay for that nice new system. This will be great. But I got they wanted to give me like $60 for everything. And I was like, well, that's not enough to buy that new system. This isn't going to get the job done. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh, well, let me look at my parents. And if I look at them like puppy dog eyes enough, maybe they'll just pay the difference. But that was a significant difference for them to attempt to pay the difference for. So that didn't happen for a little while. We ended up getting the Nintendo 64, but it wasn't until like February or March of the year or after launch. So it came out in... Gosh, I don't remember. Probably like in September, October, maybe November timeframe. And then, I didn't get it for a few months after that. So a few other games had launched by that time, but I remember getting Super Mario 64, Cruisin' USA, and Star Wars Shadows of the Empire, like all 3, the day it came out. And I was like, yep, this is a solid mix. I love this system. And it was only a couple years later that I traded that in and got a PlayStation, and that's when my life really changed. But,
and that's when history changed. Oh man, those sound like that actually sounds like a great mix of first games to have.
Yeah, like the genres and all that stuff. I mean, it had an arcade racer. Star Wars was a great adventure game, I thought, which is odd there was never a sequel. That game was
great. I did play that later.
I have no idea why there was never a sequel to that, or anything that followed that up, because it didn't get bad reviews and it sold well, but I don't know. I guess it was ahead of its time.
There's a lot of mysteries of what gets made, when doesn't get made. I'm sure there's plenty of politics and legal reasons.
But then because of Nintendo's development timelines and time frames, because I had played and beaten and mastered Mario 64 at that time, there would not be another console Mario game in that entire generation, because there's only one per generation for them. So I didn't miss out anything by getting rid of it and moving on.
It's kind of what happens with Nintendo. Nintendo, I still feel... For their first party games, I mean, they've had some duds in the last year or two, especially Wii U, that still didn't review well on the Wii U. But most of the time, they put love and care into their games, so they only need one per console generation because that's all you're going to need.
I mean, it says who though? I mean, I would take 2.
I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't take more, but I'm just saying for them, in terms of the business point of view, that's all they really need. Sure, they can make more money and everything, but I enjoy that they put their time behind it and the anticipation of the game. These serialized games that come out every year now, I feel
that's not
killing the enjoyment. But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, that's not what I want out of Nintendo, but I would like a happy medium, like, all right, we'll give you a 3-year development cycle, like not once a year, but 3 years I think is realistic enough to like, they can take a time, like a year of really developing out an idea, and then 2 years of, putting a big team on it. But I don't know, whatever. The launch games that should have been and then never did, and it took a while, and how'd those live up? Because so when like a system does come out, like all the developers and people try and get games ready for launch, if there ever is a time crunch and they know they're not going to hit like that launch window, you kind of touched on it earlier. They push it back and they give it some time. So it's usually like a fall system launch. There's games come out then. At best, you're going to get something different like in the spring, but really not until summer or the following fall for anything new, which is kind of, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you're putting a lot of money into it, into games and all that stuff. You want to make the best game that you can. So if it's not going to be ready at this time, give the time that it needs, and let that install base build up by the time that game does finally release. But yeah, there's like some pretty big games that were targeted for launches of systems, and then were just like postponed for development hell reasons, and then ultimately came out and potentially, because of hype, never actually got to live up to it. I mean, you mentioned Dark Sector. I think there's even a bigger caliber game in Fable.
Sure.
Fable for the Xbox, which I was reading originally actually started in development as a Dreamcast game, but because the system's console kind of came and went a little too quickly, the system's life went too quickly, it was then like kind of pitched around, and Microsoft bought into it and agreed to publish it and help fund the development of it, which is interesting. But then
that is super interesting. I had never heard that.
Yeah, it was supposed to be the greatest game ever made. You were supposed to, your character was supposed to age over time. All of your actions you took, good, bad, all the NPCs you interacted with all had like living, breathing souls that would respond to the world. Any scars you got from battle would carry over and continue to grow with you. You're supposed to shape the world and the story in your own image. And it just became a choice of like good or bad and like kitschy kind of humor NPCs, and was well reviewed, but was not at all like the Project Ego, which was its code name, like game that it should have been, or they hyped it up to be, and it took forever to come out.
Yeah, I think that's a problem with the hype in general, not only for the games, but even like new hardware functionality and things like that. Just the way it's sold from a marketing point of view is I think where the problem happens. Because definitely, everything that was promised with Fable, the game was still enjoyable. The game was awesome. I mean, it's still, I enjoyed 1 and 2, 3. I played, but not too much. But let's say even from that hardware point of view, like the Wii, for instance, like even though that blew up, the whole idea of the motion and even the motion controls with like PlayStation Move and stuff, I think a lot of that stuff is hyped up through marketing when it's still early technology that's not fully developed. And then that's where we get mediocre results. And that was something I think with Fable where Lionhead had this huge idea for the game, and like I think they executed some of it, but like you said, I think a lot of it was just like added in for color to say, oh, it has this, but it's not really doing what we're saying.
Yeah.
Red Faction was a game like that that I saw, that we had mentioned.
Yeah, I think that was targeted for launch. It was in that early, like first year PS2
window.
era.
Yeah,
and it.
But that had the whole promise of fully destructible worlds and
can't get through the door, blow it up.
Yeah. But once you're playing the game, you're like, wait a second, I can only blow up these predetermined areas.
Yeah.
That it still had that old school where the tone of the color was slightly off from the rest of the wall. So a lot of hype in the physics engine and what that game was going to be. And then that game wasn't what they had hyped, even though we played the crap out of that game, me and my other buddy, Andy, and some roommates at the time. Travis, at that point, we were
Travis
already
2.0.
in our... Yeah. Oh, no. Travis doesn't live up to Andy's hype. But yes,
Andy's not Travis 2.0.
My gaming crew post Travis. But Andy and a couple of roommates, we would sit around and play the Red Faction multiplayer and even Red Faction 2 when that eventually came out, and that was something we enjoyed a lot. But yeah, the game definitely wasn't what was promised.
Yeah, that makes me think about the PS2 launch itself. I talked about earlier, like loving Mario 64 and having Nintendo launch with Super Mario World. Like they've always been like good with their launches. Like they've always like provided some quality, as a company themselves. And as much as I love Sony, like they are terrible with system launches and games. Like there was some great third-party content on the PS2 when it launched. I mean, like Time Splitters, Tekken Tag Tournament, SSX. and I loved Midnight Club as a racing game and stuff. That was a decent launch, some pretty good games there. But Sony's only game was that Fantavision, that fireworks simulator.
I did play that, yeah.
That game, how do you launch a system of that caliber? It's going to change everything, and then with the Emotion Engine and all this, and then that's the game you're leading, the charge with for your own company. In that first year, they finally got around to releasing Dark Cloud, which should have been a launch game, which was hyped up to be like this. I don't think they ever said Zelda killer, because to me it's not really a Zelda clone. It's more of a clone of another series from the Super Nintendo. But still, I love that game. But yeah, Sony really flopped hard on that. And then when the PS3 rolled around, the only thing that they really had was Resistance, which I think was, people enjoyed the Resistance game, and it got some decent reviews, but it didn't sell me at all. I wasn't really that concerned with playing through it, and I wasn't that into it.
Yeah, I didn't think I thought it was a cool game and it was a cool concept, but I wasn't fully into it. Two games that have come out on Sony consoles that lost me, and they were both hyped up early on, was Killzone and Resistance.
Yeah.
I was never a fan of the Killzone series either.
Their launch franchises.
Yeah, and I just, again, I lack in a soul, and I know they're not bad games, but just lacking a soul for me is what didn't sell me on those games. But yeah, and Resistance 2 I felt was just bad. None of the multiplayer worked. They had hyped that one up for, I don't know how many people could be on multiplayer, and you could do co-op online, one of the earlier games for that, and it was just always lagging. It was a disaster in my opinion.
Yeah.
People loved it.
Do you remember the Xbox 360 launch?
Oh yeah, that was the worst launch ever.
Yeah, that was a terrible lineup. I thought a lot of crappy ports and rush jobs. They had that FIFA Road to the World Cup edition, which was just just to get a late year FIFA game out.
Just to get a FIFA
a World Cup.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that their first party offering, being like Perfect Dark and Cameo, it was just
Cameo.
Man, really. But I was looking at the games, and I was looking at that first year, because I did actually get an Xbox 360 probably 6 months into its life, maybe less. I think somebody traded one in pre-owned, and I was thinking about okay, I can do some trade-ins, I can save some money there, I can get this for kind of cheap, and I'll enjoy this until the PS3's out. But after I got it, I picked up Oblivion, which was out March. It came out in November, but Oblivion came out in March, just a couple of months later. I think it was supposed to be a launch game, but got pushed.
There were no consoles during the holiday anyway, so there was nothing to sell it with.
That was super mass shortage, but yeah, Oblivion came out. Then the port of Final Fantasy XI came out the next month after that. The original Prey, which that current game Prey has nothing to do with, but was attempting to start out as a somewhat reboot sequel of that, which is really weird. But I really liked the original Prey.
The first one was great.
Yeah, and then a couple months after that, 99 Nights, Saints Row. A week after that, Dead Rising 1, and then November, pretty much a year after its launch, was Gears of War 1. So there was if you think about it, Saints Row, Dead Rising, Gears of War, 99 Nights, Final Fantasy XI, Oblivion, and then weird ones that were kind of The Outfit and Prey, some outliers that were people did love but had some mixed reviews. That was a pretty solid first year for the 360 of all these different genres. And
that was a great year.
And those were only the ones that I recognized that I loved. There were still other ones Enchanted Arms and weird RPGs that sure weren't that great, but they covered a lot of genre bases with above average to above that mediocre range, which I think was important to get people interested in that system. And then that was mirrored to me with the that PS3 launch, with it being so terrible. I was man, I think I'll just stick to my 360 for a little bit longer, and probably the first year of the PS3's life.
I don't believe you said those words.
I know it was. I loved that 360 early on.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about in an episode or two in the past about the quality of software and having that continually release, and why I was saying how the PS4 right now in Sony over the last 8 months to a year has put out solid software, original IPs, taking chances on different games that have all paid out for them. And I think that's what 360 did in that launch, was even though they had a horrible hardware launch when it started, that first year had great software that started great franchises, and it just built up everything going for that generation. And I think that's why that generation was stellar for them. And where Xbox One has slipped up almost from the beginning is they've relied too heavily on their past successes and not worried about building that.
Yeah, no content.
That software and that content again. So hopefully they'll turn that around soon. But
yeah, that first year for the PlayStation, you had MotorStorm the March after launch, Warhawk in August, and Lair as well, and then Heavenly Sword in September. These are all like mediocre games. I mean, like great.
Heavenly Sword, I thought was great.
Yeah, but
You
I mean,
didn't like that?
but it was over too quick, and it was like, once you got like an hour into it, okay, this was the game, this was the flow of it. I'm not gonna like add any more layers to like some kind of complex mechanics or anything. It was like, you got the experience. Like it wasn't bad. Like I'd still say that.
I thought Heavenly Sword was a great game. Actually, it was one of the first games that did the full motion capture from like actors actually acting it out. It had Andy Serkis in it as like the main villain. I just thought the way it was kind of laid out and the story elements of the game were amazing for that.
I
think point in time.
Yeah, I think it was a great I don't want to say tech demo, but I mean like it definitely showed off like some great like performance and like graphical like capabilities and everything, and then like the cool like flowing hair and clothing and like all the sword fighting and all the facial animations. They were great, but I just think as far as the game goes, it wasn't like super long and didn't have like intricate mechanics or anything. I mean, I know it was within the first year and everything, but it wasn't like the first game that I think sold the PS3, Uncharted, that came out a year to the date essentially from when the PS3 launched. Like that game had like style, substance, like length, all on like a great package of quality and original. It was just an original series. Like that's something that like could sell the PS3 on, not like a Untold
Definitely.
Legends, Dark Kingdom, or Lair or anything.
Lair was super hyped up before it came out, and that was an incredible disappointment. I didn't find anything redeeming in that game whatsoever.
No.
I mean, it was cool. The dragons were cool, but I mean,
The dragons.
as a game, there was nothing. Nothing there.
Wasn't
There was
that made
like
by
nothing there.
Yeah, wasn't that made by Factor 5 as well? I think
believe
that,
so.
Yeah, and they were
believe
the
so.
team who, for 2 launches for Nintendo, produced like those super sweet like Star Wars like Rogue Squadron games that were like highly reviewed and highly acclaimed. So it was like, oh cool, another like flight sim-ish type game for from this company who can clearly do those really well. Oh, but this time it's going to be for PlayStation and an original title, and then it was kind of like a flop. And I was like, oh, well, was it just the Star Wars brand that helped you guys, or what's the deal here?
I mean, it's possible.
But yeah, that was just a wonky launch to me. I think the PS3 one, especially in the time when the 360 was just hitting on all cylinders, coming out of a great first year and entering into a second year with Gears of War 1. Like, come on, how do you compete with that?
Yeah, it was hard. I think it was just a perfect storm of events that led to that. Again, software, price point of the console,
you know what?
All that stuff.
In that year too, I forget, the Xbox Live Arcade launched in that first year, in that first summer that when I bought it, and so like Geometry Wars and Outpost Coloki X and like these weird little games that I just like love to death. I was like, man, these are what I want to play in between these big launches. But like every month there was something new and fun to play on the 360 as well. So it was just a great first probably 2-3 years for that 360.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was really what built the current state of kind of how games have developed like now and the release. I think we're seeing a lot more of the risks in those downloadable titles now, but I would like to see them with these big titles. But what games, what other games are there that maybe never came out at all that were hyped?
Oh, gosh. From like launch game standpoints, I mean...
Yeah,
I do remember
they kind of hyped them ahead of time, but then just disappeared.
Yeah, well, with like, it didn't disappear. It wasn't bad or anything, but like that Eternal Darkness game was originally a Nintendo 64 game, and then that was delayed and pushed and was supposed to be a GameCube launch game, and then it was delayed and didn't come out until like almost a year into it, But that actually got good reviews, and people look back on that game and actually really love it and wish there was a sequel.
Yeah, I love that game. That game was a trip.
Yeah, an attempted sequel was tried to be funded through Kickstarter a couple years ago, and that did not go over very well at all.
I do remember that.
Dennis Dyack and Silicon Knights, yeah. But yeah, I thought that was one that was interesting because it started off in a completely different system. But that's like to Nintendo's like point. I mean, like that GameCube Zelda, we got Wind Waker, and it was like, okay, cool, here comes Twilight Princess. And it was, I mean, to me, they did Ocarina of Time on 64, and then were able to do Majora's Mask because it was all in the same engine and using a lot, similar assets and stuff like that. They were able to sculpt that new game. So they did Wind Waker, but then an entirely different type of Zelda game was immediately like started to be developed, and it didn't make it. So then it was like released at the same time as the Wii, but also on GameCube. And that's kind of like Nintendo was like now behind the 8 ball with Zelda releases from that point forward. Like they were all pushing like with the Wii U Breath of the Wild. Like Breath of the Wild should have been a Wii U Zelda title, but instead its development pushed it so far close to the launch of the Switch that they made 2 versions of it and kind of downplayed the Wii U controller and usage.
I think that ultimately came to console sales. I think it was meant to be a Wii U Zelda, because they didn't release any original Zelda for the Wii U. They were all remakes.
Yeah,
if I'm correct.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure that was going to be
that was it. That was that console.
That was
Zelda
their
game.
that console Zelda, and the console just didn't do well. So they just kept on refining it, building it, making it, waiting to see if they should, and I think, and probably a couple of years before we even know, when they decided we got to start something else quick, they just decided to move it to the Switch, which I think worked out best for them.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. They were able to launch a system with a quality game like Nintendo typically does. The only hang-up they ever had was with the GameCube. They got a lot of flack for only having Luigi's Mansion available and not like a traditional Mario game. But that was still a good one.
Luigi's Mansion was great as well. So I don't, sometimes I feel we give games flack too without really playing the games. I don't know, like not us, but I mean just people, gaming community in general. It's like, I'm going to make up my mind before I even give myself time to get into this.
Well, remember the first unveiling of the Wind Waker? Well, kind of against Nintendo's fault, though. They showed off that tech demo of that like adult Link for the GameCube before the GameCube was released. And then the E3 that they finally announced the official Zelda game, and it's Wind Waker. Everyone's like, "Whoa, what's this? Cell shaded Zelda? Like, I don't want Zelda. I want my regular Zelda back." And people were blown up about it. But that's one of the best Zelda games there is, in my opinion.
Yeah, that game is amazing.
I love Wind Waker. But when I was doing a little bit of research to look at these launch games, this actually was kind of funny to me. The GameCube came out November 18th of 2001. I believe it was 2001. Yeah, and then but just on December 3rd, just a couple weeks later, that's when Smash Brothers came out. Like Smash Brothers just missed the launch of the system. Like, could they not have like pulled all the punches to get 3 weeks of development, out at the tail end of the game? Like,
see, 2 or 3 weeks doesn't sound like development. That might sound like actual production and like getting the physical games out. All
right, then call that production plant and rush order that or something like that. Like I don't get like how do you like a game of that caliber. Because it wasn't like it was an original game.
How do they let it miss the window? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
How do they let it miss launch?
Yeah, like it's a game of that, because at that era, like I said, that was the era that my buddies, when we would talk about like launches and stuff, we were looking at the Xbox launch, and we were looking at what the PS2 had launched with in the history that I had the year before, and so it was like, oh, Nintendo's only launching with Luigi's Mansion and Wave Race Blue Storm. What? Like, oh, they're dropping the ball. And then the best-selling GameCube game, and one of the best games in that series, Melee, was just a couple weeks outside the launch window. So I just think that's an odd bit of history that it took that long to come out.
That is interesting. I think I got a GameCube probably a year or two after it came out.
Yeah.
Probably around 2003 is when I ended up getting a GameCube.
I loved
I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah, I loved the GameCube. I think that was definitely a great one from Nintendo. But I think it's because they had some good third party support with that system. But I remember the GameCube that I got. It wasn't technically mine, but like my brother had a job, and I don't know. He's older than me. I don't know if he had it was like his first paycheck from his job, or if it was just like early on with his like first actual job. We were just bored sitting around at home. I think we were trying to play a PS2 game, or you know what? I think my PS2 had like disc read errored out, and I was like needing to fix it or replace it. But we were just sitting around, and he was like, "Want to go get a GameCube?" And I was like, yes, of course, why not? So we just like drove down.
You have to ask.
Yeah, we drove down to like a Target or something like that, and he just bought it. And I just remember being like the craziest thing in the world. Like he just like spent cash on buying a system and like a game and like a memory card and stuff like that. And we took it back and like we played it. I don't even know why can't remember the game that we got. I don't think it was before Zelda, I believe.
That's what I was about to ask you too. Like, what's the game you guys got? I think you were just so bewildered that he just walked up and was like, "GameCube, game, memory card, now, thanks."
Like what? You could just have the money to do that? Like, oh man. I want to say, I mean, we had a lot of fun with Super Monkey Ball at launch with
Monkey
with
Ball
Austin and
awesome.
Thomas, but I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember what that first game was.
The first two Monkey Balls, we committed to those and did every level, and we were all about completing that game.
You know,
that
I
game
think
was fun.
I think we had some kind of it must have been like a Super Mario Sunshine bundle, potentially, one that came with Mario Sunshine, and then I think he bought like Metroid Prime or something like that.
Boom! Two amazing games.
Yeah, I think he mainly played the Metroid. I don't ever remember playing the GameCube much. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'm just misremembering it. But I do remember getting a good chunk of Super Mario Sunshine time in, and I never had that myself for my own GameCube that I would end up getting later. But yeah, that GameCube was a great system, and it actually had a decent launch for the amount of titles that it had. Like available on like Sony like really just peppered out like so many like third party games, but like a lot of them were just garbage that were available on day one. A handful of great ones. Nintendo just had less, but they were of a higher quality. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I would always take that over quantity, and that was something I was going to comment on. Was especially now in today's day and age, I feel people are spoiled with the amount of games we just have. Period. Because it's just not, console games. Like now we have games on our phones, games that work for our tablets that are different, games for, if you have multiple systems, like we mentioned Xbox Live Arcade or the PlayStation Store, all these other games that are coming out. It's like nonstop games coming out. So like when a new console comes out, I hear that all the time, like, this is all the games there are, and I'll literally look at the wall or think about the options available, and I'm like, what do you mean? There's at least 40, 50 games on a console within the first couple of months. So, like, it's like, it baffles me how, like, just, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's a quality issue thing where people aren't getting hooked or what it is, but maybe it's the attention span that people have now. But I feel like you had mentioned earlier, like back in the day, a console would come out, you get 5-7 games.
Yeah.
There you go. Hang on to those for a while.
Yeah, the Nintendo 64 had 2. Like it wasn't there was like a third party games in addition to Nintendo's 2. It was Nintendo's 2 day one, and that was it. Like Super Mario 64, Pilot Wing 64. That was your option.
Enjoy.
Like, okay, we know you're buying Mario, and we know like 2/3 of you will buy Pilot Wings. But Mario is enough for you to really enjoy that, and you'll play some games in a couple of months when other companies start releasing their games.
We're done. And I think that lines up even with like the Switch launch now. The Switch had maybe 10 games out in the first month, but in parallel to Mario 64 was kind of first of its kind, big, huge open world exploration game. So they were like, well, people are going to love this game. They're going to put time in it. We don't have to rush titles to launch. Same thing with the Switch, where there was only a handful of games, but they knew that people were going to end up spending hundreds of hours in Breath of the Wild. So
yeah,
it definitely, I didn't play or have the need to play anything else besides Breath of the Wild for easily like a month and a half.
Yeah, if you're a company, I guess it's not a bad idea. Like if that's the type of game you could release at launch, that will like buy a lot of time to hope your third party companies start to release stuff after that. So
it's definitely a gamble, but
I mean, well, it's not like you can actually regularly do that. They did that because they were in a bad spot with the Wii U, and the game would just so happen to already be in development that its delay to meet the Switch launch was capable for them. So, like, I don't know if that's they could regularly do that, but with the way they develop Zelda titles, I mean, I clearly could think another Zelda title could be ready by the time a new Nintendo console comes out. So there you go, they could do it all over again. The recent the PS4 launch, I mean, there was a pretty good a spread of games, but again, they're all like B- grade at best, and that's like, oh gosh, I think the Need for Speed Rivals, I actually think that's a really good game. That was my favorite game out of launch. But everything, that game was so good, dude. Did you not play that?
I did.
Oh, man.
First, I'm not a big racing game fan. I like more of the arcade, more like the Burnout and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's what this kind of felt like to me. Well, I guess it was made by Criterion and Ghost Games.
I don't know if I didn't give it enough time. It felt, the constant online connection that was required, not because I don't have internet, but it seemed like there was always people in my world that were messing up whatever I was doing. Like, I wasn't interested in interacting with other people.
I don't think you had to have that feature on. Yeah, I don't think you had to have that feature on.
Maybe I only played it a handful of times, so probably I didn't dig deep enough to turn that off. But I just remember playing and constantly getting just T-boned at an intersection for no reason from some other person that was playing, or just random things happening that I was like, I'm trying to do this mission or this thing that popped up, and now I'm getting thrown off. And I think I just rage quit on it one day and was like, fuck this.
Oh man, I love that. Yeah, it had two parallel campaign or career campaign, whatever you want to call it, cops and illegal racers side of things. And I fully finished one of them. I don't remember why I can't think of which one I did. I think it was just the illegal racer side. But the final race you did on that one literally is around the entire map of that game. It just basically is a big circle around the whole thing. It's a 20-minute race, I think. And it's not about getting in first place. It was just about keeping your car together, because the aggressive police that were after you and helicopters and all the traps they would set and stuff like that. You had to really memorize where those a handful of garages were that you would be able to drive through and restore your car. But yeah, I don't know. I really like that game. I mean, there was other games that we should have liked, and that Sony really wanted you to like Killzone. Like we already talked about, and Knack, which was really shit the bed, and I don't know. That was one of those ones that was supposed to be a tech demo that really poorly was a tech demo. But yeah, the biggest thing to me was because the PlayStation Store was ready day one. There was a game called Super Motherload, which was a downloadable game. It was a resource management dig dug game, and I was hooked on that. I remember loving the feature of being able to save those videos of your gameplay and stuff. And I was doing that day 3 because I was hours into Super Motherload, and I was trying to find a game I really liked otherwise. And it wasn't until later that I actually picked up Need for Speed Rivals, and then I realized, okay, cool. I've got Rivals, I've got Resogun, and I got Super Motherload. 2 of these are downloadable games. One of these is a retail game. But whatever, this is a good launch in my mind.
No, Resogun was great. I agree on that one.
Yeah, but is there any other launch games that you can remember?
Just recent times, I really want to hear other people's opinions on this because I also played very little of it. It didn't click with me when I first started playing it, and I've heard from many people the same response. But Watch Dogs, the original Watch Dogs, was super hyped and shown off at E3 with that crazy demo where the game looked one of the first games of the Xbox One, PS4 generation that was going to come out, and they were really showing off the graphic capabilities of their engine and whatnot. And then the game came out and it just kind of fizzled. I played it, and I probably only put in 10 hours or less, but just didn't find it entertaining or fun or delivering on many of the interactive promises that game was trying to deliver. A thing at the beginning of that generation was a lot of interactivity with a second screen, with either using your tablet or your phone or this and that, and it was supposed to have some of those features that just to me were unnecessary. So yeah, I don't know how familiar you are with that game, or if anyone out there played it or really loved it, please let us know.
Yeah.
That was one I thought that definitely did not do well.
Yeah, that's one of those franchises like Assassin's Creed that just blew up, and I just don't understand. And they're both from Ubisoft, so they know how to force those things down our throats, whether we like them or not.
I mean, Assassin's Creed, I thought the first one had its mistakes, but after that, like that whole Ezio trilogy was fantastic.
Yeah, see, I had to like the series, like, you know, from the beginning to be able to get to that point. Like, so I mean, by knowing that it gets good later, I still want to play that first one. I mean, even if it's
the first one I still think was good for setting up the story and everything. I just think mechanic wise and things, they were trying completely new things at that time that didn't work out exactly maybe the way that they planned, but that they immediately addressed in the follow up game. And then from Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, Revelations, those were great.
Did you ever give? I mean, because we got segued from the Watch Dogs, but did you ever do the Watch Dogs 2 and at least give that a shot at all, or just?
Yes, that was definitely much more fun. I've also only played 5-6 hours of it, just because there's so much out at this point, and I got the kids around now too, so it makes it more difficult. But that was immediately more engaging and more fun and more just playful in the way that it was. And it sold from my point of view and from what I see every day, it sold much better as well.
Did you also play a lot of Rise, Son of Rome on your Xbox One at launch? Did you love that one?
I played it. I mean, it was...
I'm being facetious.
I mean, that one was a one and done. That was you beat it in 6 hours and you're done with it.
Yeah, that was Microsoft. That's Cameo and Perfect Dark Zero quality from Microsoft.
Hey, man. Cameo, I played that whole game too. That was, it was silly, but I played it. I'm a sucker for platformers and that type of game.
Yeah, yeah. But
I don't care. I'll play that shit.
Yeah, launch games, guys. I know we kind of ended up talking about two topics here: launch games and hyped games that were like really overhyped. I know that we kind of started from launch, but where they ended. But really, if you guys out there listening have any of your own opinions of memorable launch games or getting those systems for the first time and what those games were that you enjoyed, share those with us and let us know. And those overhyped games, what games were those hyped up to be the be all end all greatest game of all time, were massively delayed, and then just whether they delivered for you or not. Like, I want to know your opinions on that stuff too. I think that'll be fun to hear from you guys. But yeah, otherwise, Rich, do you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap this thing up?
No, I think you wrapped it up pretty nicely. Nice to be back. Sorry I had a miss last week, guys, but life demands certain things. But nice to be back.
All right. Well, so after you guys listen to this, if you do want to give us a call, we appreciate it. Any feedback you've got, any questions, comments, whether they were related to this episode or not, go ahead and just shoot us a question, and we will hear it out and we will listen to you. That voicemail number, again, is 605-777-0433. It's just a recorded voicemail line. You won't have to talk to anybody at all. It's super cool. And we appreciate very much all the comments we've gotten from all you guys so far to help us make those feedback episodes. Hopefully be able to get another one next week. If you guys got some more. Otherwise, keep listening. We would also appreciate it if you, whether you're listening to it through iTunes or whatever network you're listening to through, if you could rate, review, give us a thumbs up, give us a 5-star, whatever it may be. That'll help us kind of expand out and have strangers and people we've never even been in contact with listen to our show as well. But for Rich, I am Darren. Thanks for listening to the podcast.
Bye, guys.